everyone, and thanks so much for joining me here on the first real episode of Early Genius. I piloted an episode last week just to see how everything would go, testing a new platform out for live streaming. And tonight I'm giving it a go with Soundgarden. And before I get to that, I wanted to also talk with you a little bit about uh, the Netflix documentary Woodstock 99. I think it's called Trainwreck, and I just got done watching. It's 3 parts, and I was curious what you all had to say about this documentary. I've heard a lot of people talking about how they blame Fred Durst and Limp Bizkit for the carnage that happened and the fires and destruction. Not to say that Fred Durst wasn't blind or seemingly indifferent to what was going on. It's really clear that the promoters didn't plan at all for what could happen and minimized what was happening in real time at the time. And even all these years later, don't own up to their responsibilities in what happened in the destruction and the assaults on women, the many uh, assaults that were in plain sight to everybody that happened. And the physical property destruction was very clear to everyone, but you watch the video of what was happening in the mosh pits, and not just in the pits, but people crowd surfing and diving and just the grabbing that was happening as a routine matter of fact. It was just really stunning, startling, and really upsetting to see. And the security was completely you know, not up to the task. And they talk about that in the documentary as well. Anyway, I urge you all to watch Trainwreck on Netflix. It's a 3-part documentary. You can buzz through pretty quickly. I think all 3 parts take about 2.5 hours, and I watched all three in one sitting. So let's get to tonight's topic, Soundgarden. And I'm focusing Early Genius on, first of all, the show is about looking at live performances, the very earliest live performances you can find on video for artists who became legendary, great Hall of Famers, or if not in the Hall of Fame, certainly multi-platinum artists or artists of such strong revere that they influenced more than a generation of artists after them. Soundgarden is certainly that. They are not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame yet. I don't know whether they will get in. Maybe at some point they will. Chris Cornell certainly deserves to get in, both for his contributions in Soundgarden and Audio Slave. Not to mention the Temple of the Dog record, which is wholly his creation, and his solo material, which was amazing solo material. And I'm going to be focusing Early Genius, or at least the first couple of dozen episodes, on bands that were really significant for me in my musical upbringing. And I had already gone through the hair metal days. I grew up with bands like Motley Crue and Poison and Rat, bands like that. And even before that, I was a huge fan of AC/DC, and then the new wave of British heavy metal. Judas Priest became a big deal to me. Queensryche became a big deal. But when grunge happened, what became known as grunge, it completely reawakened me as a music fan. I had grown really just kind of dulled by what was happening in music. And, all these bands that came out of Los Angeles in the early to mid 80s, it seemed to me more about image. They were very misogynistic. At least Motley Crue and Rat and Poison all seemed to be very, much from a party boy, male focused perspective. And I guess without knowing it, I was wondering who were going to be my next musical attachments. And I was just starting to write for Modern Drummer magazine in 1990 when I got an album sent to me from A&M Records. And it was this record, Louder Than Love, from Soundgarden. And they were a brand new band to me. I was not aware of Soundgarden before. They're from Seattle, and much to my chagrin, they had played in San Francisco a number of times before that, they were one of Sub Pop Records in Seattle. Sub Pop, a big independent label. They were kind of their darlings in the late 80s. And they put out 2 EPs that were kind of sandwiched together, released as one. Screaming Life came out in October of 87. That was the very first release from Soundgarden, was Screaming Life in October of 87. Then August of 88 was FOP, FOPP. That became Screaming Life slash FOP. That was put out together. And then their first proper album was this one, Ultra Mega OK. And this also came out on Sub Pop. And none of these records made a real dent in the public consciousness. They certainly weren't getting airplay outside of Seattle. There were no singles to be had on these records, really. And so Soundgarden was very much a Seattle band. And what we're going to look at today are some of their earliest performances that we can find on video, that I could find on video, and then draw an arc to when they became the artists who started really drawing attention in a big way. And we're going to see if we can connect the threads between the Soundgarden of the mid and late 80s to the Soundgarden that became platinum artists and the legends that we know today. So the first video that I have up, and by the way, I would like for you to comment if you're a Soundgarden fan, or even if you're just watching the stream, please let me know how it's sounding and hearing. I'd love to hear your thoughts just on how everything is going. That would be fantastic. And so the first video that I'm going to play stems from 1986. And it is from the KCMU radio station. It's a benefit for the Rainbow Tavern. Now, this video is at a time when even Matt Cameron, the drummer who drummed on every record from Ultra Mega OK, actually from Screaming Life and FOP on, he wasn't even in the band yet. Scott Sundquist was the initial drummer in this band. He's in this video. Now, I'll tell you, it's a crappy video. It only goes for about 4 minutes, but I just want to show you a little taste of what Soundgarden were like back then. Again, the sound's not that great, but we're going to hear what Chris Cornell's voice sounds like. So let me call this video up, and just to give you a reference. The video hung up there. Let me see if I can get it going again. I just wanted to for you to hear his voice. Well, I'm not able to get it right now. Let me switch back here. So their sound at that time was very blues based, very heavy blues, obviously influenced by Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, and some of the psychedelic bands of the 1970s. And they certainly didn't exhibit any sort of melody from back then. I'm going to open up another video here. I'm going to try to play that same video again. Let me see if I can get that going. Let me forward that here. So you can hear his voice, amazing clarity in his voice back then. Now, let me pause this video. Just to give you a little context about Chris Cornell. So he was only 22 years old at the time, 22 years old at the time of this video that he was singing here. And the rest of the band, Kim Thile on guitar, Hiro Yamamoto on bass, and Scott Sundquist on drums. Scott was their original drummer and departed after 2 years. We played just a little more of that. So it's really bad audio quality on that video. I mean, look, it was 1986. Look what they were working with back then. But it gives you a sense of what Chris Cornell had as a natural dynamic back then. Nobody could take anything away from his voice, and at the time they weren't necessarily a distinctive band, at least stylistically, but they embodied power. And at the time, I want to give you some context about Soundgarden when they came out in their very first album, Screaming Life, in October of 87, the FOP EP in August of 88. I just want to give you context of what was happening in broader music at the time. So Van Halen, OU812 was number 1 on the charts June, July of 86. This video I just showed you was from 86. And Def Leppard's Hysteria album was number 1 in July of 1986. And, Soundgarden and all the bands from Seattle in the aftermath of Soundgarden, all were in the vapors of these kinds of more showy, glammy rock bands. Now, yes, of course, there was an indie rock scene, the punk scene, hardcore scenes, all were brewing underneath, but there was no context for popularity. They were all very much in the underground. Radio, certainly not any commercial radio weren't playing bands such as that from the hardcore scene or the punk scene, the independent rock scene. You had to go to college radio stations to get any airplay if you were a band like Soundgarden. You were lucky if your hometown radio station was playing them. So, so we get to the next video. Let me load that up here. This video takes place, it's one song. It's from a taping in Seattle. It's the song Beyond the Wheel. Beyond the Wheel made it onto the Ultra Mega OK album, and it was performed by Soundgarden very late in their career. They kept performing that live, certainly after they came out with King Animal. I guess you can call that their reunion album. And so this song that you're about to hear some of, they played this well into their career. This is Beyond the Wheel from 1987, right before the Screaming Life album came out. I'm going to forward a little bit here. His voice is going to pick up here in a little bit. He's going to reach some of the highest notes he ever reached, coming pretty soon. Thanks, Trish, for commenting. I really appreciate it. It's great to see you here. So just listen to the power, Chris Cornell. So this is the first high quality recording, you could say, of Soundgarden that I could find. And again, this is from 1987, right before their very first official release came out on Sub Pop Records, which was the Screaming Life EP. Now, is Soundgarden here, like, are they the Soundgarden that we came to know through Outshined on the Bad Motorfinger record, Black Hole Sun, and Fell on Black Days from Super Unknown? No way. Completely different band. Okay, so what Soundgarden were at this time, I would call them, they were very much sort of an indie, in their own way. They were kind of, I won't say they were a hardcore band, but they weren't a metal band, but they were certainly an indie band that had psychedelic heavy rock roots. And they were still defining themselves about what they were going to be. Right away, Chris Cornell, from the very beginning of his career, was getting comparisons to Robert Plant, and deservedly so. I mean, he could hit those same notes that Robert Plant could hit. He had the power. He had certainly the stage presence back then. He didn't own the stage in the way Robert Plant did. I think Chris Cornell, he was sort of a reluctant frontman to some degree. You know, he came out, he was a drummer initially as in his musical life, and he played drums initially in this band, but it was just Hiro Yamamoto on bass, Kim Thayil on guitar, Chris Cornell drumming and singing. And they figured, we want to put Chris out front. Let's get a drummer. That's when they got Scott Sundquist. And then not too long after that, Matt Cameron. So the first real concert that you can see kind of in full from Soundgarden was from Los Angeles in 1988. So they had yet to put out Ultra Mega OK. They were just touring on the Screaming Life and the FOP EPs. And I wanted, this video is fascinating because of what it doesn't show. So let me call this up. Hold on a second here. So this is a show from 1988, and in this show, they didn't have enough originals to cover a full set. So this set takes place at Club Lingerie in Los Angeles, February 11th, 1988. The first song that on this set that ends up making it on a later record, I'm going to play that. It's about 12 minutes in. It's called Power Trip, and it made it onto Louder Than Love. Let's see if I can find that. Yeah, this is part of Power Trip. Hold on. Okay, this is Power Trip. I'll be quiet for now. So so this video again, it shows them kind of in their sludgy, grudgy best at that time. They're can you tell, like, if you're in this show, could you tell this is one of the questions I'm kind of personally fascinated with. If you're at this show, can you tell there's something special about this band? Let's listen to a little more now. This is again, this song Power Trip is the only song in this whole show that made it onto their major label debut, Louder Than Love. So I'm going to play a little more of that. And I'm going to ask you, can you tell that there's something special in this band that is going to make it, or that is different than other artists at the time? I mean, we're looking back now. This is 34 years ago. I'm sorry, 24 years ago. Is it 34? Yeah, it's 34 years ago. My math's terrible. Okay, so let's look a little more at this. We're going to let this song play out. Okay, so they're laying it all out on the stage, and I want to watch the crowd reaction when they're finished here. Here it comes. Just give me. It's going to be about 30 seconds. Let's just watch the crowd reaction. Okay, that is just barely polite applause. Barely. Okay, that's Soundgarden in their heyday. I mean, not in their heyday, pre-heyday, but in their formative years. And in LA, they're not drawing much response in 1988, just a smattering of applause. And again, I want to give you some context of what was happening in Los Angeles in 1988. You think about it, Appetite for Destruction, Guns N' Roses, was #1 on the charts, Billboard, August into October of 1988. Okay. This show predated that. This is February of 88. So think about what was going on in LA. Yes, there's an underground rock scene. Club Lingerie, I don't know what they were. I grew up in Northern California. I've never been to Club Lingerie. I don't know what their roster, their calendar was like at the time, but this was still when Motley Crue, Guns N' Roses, Rat, Poison, all those bands were kind of kings of LA. And Jane's Addiction, yes, Jane's Addiction was coming up at that time, and people knew them. If anything, I would think that Soundgarden would have appealed to some degree to fans of Jane's Addiction, but Jane's were getting big. They were from LA, they were kings of that scene. Here's a Seattle band, Soundgarden, that came down to LA and clearly was not conquering that crowd. So that's just context, okay? That people, at least at Club Lingerie on February 11th, 1988, did not know who they had before them. Maybe even Soundgarden at that time didn't know what they would be or who they could become at that point. So, and also I want to go to the end of this set. Now, by the way, in this set, they did a medley of covers toward the end. Working Man from Rush, Communication Breakdown by Zeppelin, and I'm 18 by Alice Cooper, all in a medley. And, clearly Chris Cornell had some talent, a lot of talent, brimming with talent, but the LA crowd was not all that wowed by them. Let's forward to the end of this tape just to hear what the crowd response is here. This is the song "Nothing to Say" from their early records. Now let's watch the crowd here. Okay, polite applause. Certainly not overwhelming. Chris Cornell at the very end there says, "Thank you, that's it." When he was sitting down, that's what he had to say. "Thank you, that's it." So, okay, at least you can safely say that nobody in that crowd came away. I can't say this definitively, but certainly few people in that crowd, February 11, 1988, at Club Lingerie in Los Angeles, were looking at that show from Soundgarden saying, those guys, they're amazing. I want to see them again. Maybe they had some people say that, but that applause was like, let's go get a beer. That's what that applause said. And the last video I want to show you in this series was from, let me load that video here. The last video I'm going to show you is from Rhino Records in Westwood, Los Angeles, California, September 24th, 1989. So at this point, they still have not put out their even their Sub Pop full-length debut. Ultra Mega OK did not come out until 1990. So this is from 89, and they're playing at a record store. Okay? This is Soundgarden. Now you watch. They're packed onto this stage, if you can call it a stage. So let's watch some of this. Okay, so I'm going to pause it right here for a second. This is the song "Get on the Snake." So all the songs, by the way, all the songs on this concert, and I think it's 6 songs here. They've played for about half an hour. All the songs are from the Louder Than Love record. So they're previewing this record. So I have a date here that this concert was in. Yeah, this concert is in 89, but Louder Than Love didn't come out until 90. So they hadn't even put out this record yet. So, but they're previewing all the songs. So let's hear how this crowd takes to hearing for the first time songs that were going to be on the major label debut of Soundgarden, Louder Than Love. Look at these kids standing there. They are just standing there. Okay. I can tell you when I first heard Soundgarden, when I first heard Louder Than Love, I was over the moon for that record. I couldn't believe a band sounded like that. Now, I hadn't heard the earlier material, but when I heard this record, Louder Than Love, and Get on the Snake is on this record. When I first heard that record, I was floored. I couldn't believe a modern band could sound like this, and I had to have more. But look at this crowd. You know, I didn't know what Soundgarden would be. All I heard, this is the first time I'd heard them, was this record. This crowd is hearing these songs for the first time. They hadn't heard this record yet because it hadn't come out. But look at them. Look at how they're acting here. Okay. Listen to this band. They're rocking it. They're rocking it, and this crowd is not having it. They're not having it. I'm going to pause it for a second. Mark Wohan, thank you for joining the stream. Mark, you were listening to them in 89. That's before I first heard them. I heard them, I think it was 90 when I first heard them. Positive it was. And you were a big fan of the photographer that captured that scene, Charles Peterson. Yeah, he did some amazing work. So, Mark, did you ever have a chance to see Soundgarden back then in those days? I saw them at the Warfield in San Francisco on the Louder Than Love tour. But, you know, I didn't get to see them previous to that. I didn't even know who they were. So, Mark, if you saw them, I'd like to know what your thoughts were when you first heard and saw Soundgarden, or anybody else on this stream. Please let me know when you first encountered Soundgarden, if you caught them in the early days, write in the chat. I want to hear your thoughts on what your experiences were when you first encountered Soundgarden and what you thought of them. Now, if you first saw them on the Super Unknown tour, even Bad Motorfinger, I mean, come on, they were already getting it at that point. But if you saw them Louder Than Love and previous to that, I want to know what your thoughts were. So, this is my dog Humphrey, by the way. He's a big Soundgarden fan. So this crowd, okay, I want to keep going through this. This crowd fascinates me. You know, it's a good turnout, as you'll see. The camera pans at some point, and there's a good turnout for this show, but they just are not feeling it. At least they're not. There's a couple of people grooving, a couple. Okay, let's move forward in this tape. Okay, we're getting toward the end of the song, so we'll play this out to the end to hear how the crowd reacts at the end of this song. Okay, no applause. People didn't even clap. There wasn't even a polite clap there at the end of that song. I can't fathom having been at that record store for that show and just standing there right in front of them. This is Chris Cornell and Soundgarden. I first saw them at the Warfield. I was into it. I was into that show. I'm not saying I knew they were going to be superstars necessarily. I didn't have any sense they would end up writing the hits they wrote, but man, they floored me from the beginning. I knew they were a special band. Let's look a little further into this show. Okay, so here's the crowd. It was more of the crowd. Okay, so this is we're at the break of the kind of the break before the finale of the song Ugly Truth. Ugly Truth was the lead song on Louder Than Love. So let's just hear, that's why you're hearing that, just Chris Cornell playing the guitar right there. And then it gets into the final crescendo and build of the song. So let's just play that out. Okay. A little more applause there. A little bit more. Okay. People are maybe getting jazzed a little bit. I want to make a note here. The bassist at the time here in the band was Jason Everman. Jason Everman never performed on a record from Soundgarden. Hiro Yamamoto, who was a founder of the band, he left after they recorded Louder Than Love, their major label debut. He didn't want to tour. It was just, it was too much of a life in music for him. I guess the touring life wasn't for him. So he stepped aside. They brought in Jason Everman. He didn't work out on a personality level. And then they brought in Ben Shepherd. Ben Shepherd played on Bowed Motorfinger and every record they've made since, and did every tour. He was a huge, and continues to be, when at least until Chris Cornell died, a huge musical contributor to that band. I want to say this about Jason Everman. I don't know if you know the story about him, and I'm not going to have this 100% correct, but he ended up joining the military after he left Soundgarden. And by the way, he also played, I think for a brief spell, he played with Nirvana. He wasn't, not in place of Chris Novoselic. I guess he was like a second guitarist for a little bit. So he had experience with Nirvana and also was in Soundgarden. He ended up joining the military. I guess he became kind of a survivalist at one point and joined the military. And he was a decorated soldier at some point. I think the LA Times, some newspaper did a major profile of Jason Everman, and I read it years ago. I don't remember the circumstances, but it was a really well done story, and fascinating that this guy turned up well after people forgot about him musically and became a very different person, things that mattered to him in his life and what he became. Anyway, just a footnote there. If you ever want to look up an interesting story, look up whatever happened to Jason Everman after Soundgarden. Might be an interesting story. So let's go further here in this videotape. Again, this is from the Rhino Records, Westwood, Los Angeles, September 24th, 1989. Hard to believe this is in 89, so well before Louder Than Love came out, because all these songs are on Louder Than Love. I have to think that the date on this show, on the video, might be incorrect. Might be, because Ultra Mega OK didn't come out till 90. Let me look here. I have in my notes that it was 90, and yeah, the original Sub Pop, it's not giving me. This is a reissue of Ultra Mega OK that I have. But anyway, let's go further in this show and see if you can hear how Soundgarden became the Soundgarden we know today. Let's go a little further in this tape. Okay, so this song right here, it's called Hands All Over. It was the first video that they made for Louder Than Love. And really, it was the only single that had any chance of an opportunity to become a hit on Louder Than Love. I think it got played on 120 Minutes on MTV, I believe. That show that used to run in the middle of the night, I think from midnight till 2 in the morning or 2 to 4. I can't remember when 120 Minutes aired. But the video didn't go anywhere. And Soundgarden, they never, at least on Louder Than Love, they never got on a major tour. There was no sign, at least on this record, that they were going to be the Soundgarden we knew, at least in terms of their popularity. Let's listen musically and see if we can hear musically what they were going to become. This is Louder Than Love that made it on to Louder Than Love. I'm sorry, this is Hands All Over. Hands All Over from Louder Than Love. Okay, so you can hear it's got a great groove. And when I first heard this song, I thought it was a pretty astounding song. I loved it. It was my favorite on the record, at least immediately. And, there's people rocking out here a little bit, a couple of heads bobbing. But where's the excitement, people? I just have to pause it here. Look how young Chris Cornell looks here. He's such a baby here. So he was born in 1964. This video supposedly is from 89. I have doubts that the video date is correct. I have to think it was 1990, but regardless, okay, so that would make him 26 here. 26-year-old Chris Cornell. So I am marveling at this performance. Just, here's a band. And also, you can't help but marvel when in hindsight what happened to an artist, and the opportunity. I wonder if any of these kids here do any of these kids look at this video today? Do they even know that this is up there? And they look back and go, yeah, I was just kind of indifferent, or there's a part in this video where it pans to the crowd. Let me see if I can forward to a spot that shows you this crowd. That's the end of the video. I know there's a spot in here where you can see the crowd. Well, anyway, let's just look here. Matt Cameron going at it. This is a song called Gun from Louder Than Love. Look at that. Listen to that voice, Chris Cornell. Okay, I want to see the crowd reaction here. Okay, the crowd getting a little louder, but certainly not a boisterous crowd. Certainly not over the top enthusiasm for Soundgarden here. They're clapping. They're okay. They're happy. They're glad they're there. I guess what else are they going to do on that day? I guess they're thinking. And so I want to put it back to you, listening, watching here. Can you see hints, any sign beyond Chris Cornell's voice that there was a really special band here? Can you? I will put out there that I think it takes two, not always, but a band, like a 4-piece, 5-piece band, really is dependent on two people in their personnel to become a hit. One is the vocalist, obviously. And the other, maybe I'm biased here because I'm a drummer, but the drummer. If you have a fantastic drummer, that sets you apart. You know, you can do so many things with a fantastic drummer. You don't need a fantastic guitar player. Kim Thayil, certainly nobody's idea of a virtuosic guitar player. Chris Cornell, this tour, this show right here is the first on video of him playing guitar, rhythm guitar with Soundgarden. The other videos have him just singing. Okay, so, you know, Pearl Jam, Mike McCready, good guitarist. But when Dave Abbruzzese was in that band, explosive drummer. Matt Cameron is now their drummer. Not the same kind of drummer today with Pearl Jam. Matt Cameron isn't, as he was here with Soundgarden. Now, he was a lot younger, maybe a lot of energy and vigor, maybe a lot more to be pissed off about and hungry about back then. But, he's a much calmer drummer with Pearl Jam. And he always has been since drumming with Pearl Jam than he was here with Soundgarden. But can you hear them? Were they early geniuses? Were Soundgarden, can you call them an early genius? I would say no. I don't think what we're hearing in these videos would lead you to believe that this would be the band that would write the Super Unknown record. Extremely different record, Super Unknown. And let's look at Bad Motorfinger. Came out in 91. I still think Bad Motorfinger, pound for pound, is the best Soundgarden album in their entire repertoire. And that was the follow-up to Louder Than Love. An amazing record. There are hints of Bad Motorfinger here in this. If with better production on a couple of these songs on Louder Than Love, I would say Hands All Over, which we heard earlier in this broadcast. I would think Hands All Over could have been on Bad Motorfinger, might have fit, but I don't think you hear much in terms of the songcraft, or let's say, I won't say lack thereof, but the way they compose songs and what they were writing musically, very different band back in 1989, 1990 than the band they just became later in 91, 92, and certainly with Super Unknown, I think came out in 95, and extremely different. Where did that come from? So same artists. So think about this. Now, a lot of what happens in music today, bands aren't signing multi-album deals. Like bands back then, you were given 3, 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 records, depending on the artist, to find your way. I mean, actually, if the most record deals back then, if after the second record you weren't showing promise commercially, the label could drop you. And Soundgarden, Bad Motorfinger was their second major label record that did show promise. They were getting some video play with Outshined, and they were getting on big tours. By the time Bad Motorfinger came out, they were opening for Metallica and other big bands. In fact, I saw them on the Bad Motorfinger tour. It had just come out, or hadn't even come out yet, and they opened a stadium show. It was a one-off. Metallica was the headliner. I think Queensryche was the number 2 band. God, who was the third band? I'm blanking on the third band, but Soundgarden opened the show. It was at the Oakland Raiders football stadium. Huge outdoor show. And Soundgarden was the first to go on. Anyway, I don't think the band you're hearing here just a few years earlier, I don't think they gave you a lot of hints that they were going to be the mammoth band, and that Chris Cornell would go on to be such a revered songwriter, not just a vocalist, but such a soulful, in-depth songwriter. I don't think there's hints of that here. In fact, in this show, I could play you a little bit of it in this show that we have on this videotape. There's a song called Big Dumb Sex. It's on Louder Than Love. And he shouts the F word 35 times in this song. I want to see if I can find it here, just to give you a little taste of what their songcraft was. Because I guarantee Big Dumb Sex, the label would have said, A&M Records would have said, no way could this go on Super Unknown. It wouldn't even go on Bad Motorfinger, but it went on Louder Than Love. Let's try to find it. I don't want to bore you while I try to shuffle my way through this videotape. But Big Dumb Sex had the F word 35 times in it, and uh, by that alone, so that kind of establishes them, yes, as kind of an FU indie band, but it doesn't at all tell you about a band that cares to, have a hit album or hit songs, I guess. Did they even think at the time that they were that kind of band? Probably not. Soundgarden. So I want to give you a little more context about where Soundgarden were coming from at this time. So think of all the Seattle bands. Nirvana, Bleach came out in June of 89. Okay. That Bleach was Nirvana's first record, very first record. And that came out after the 2 EPs that Soundgarden put out. Okay. And Nevermind didn't come out until September of 91. So by then, I guess, let me see when Bad Motorfinger came out. I think Bad Motorfinger came out right at the same time as Nevermind. Alice in Chains' Facelift record came out in August of 90. Pearl Jam's 10 album came out in August of 91 and didn't even break the top 10 until May of 92. That's how long it took Pearl Jam to catch traction. So I'm just saying, so Soundgarden, they were kind of the trailblazers coming out of Seattle. They were certainly the most revered band from that scene at that time. Nirvana weren't necessarily a Seattle band. They were in Olympia, Washington. They came down to Seattle for some shows. But of all these Seattle bands, Soundgarden was the first to sign a major label deal. And people looked up to them. All in that Seattle scene, they looked up to Chris Cornell. Now, again, they didn't necessarily think Soundgarden was going to be the trailblazers they became. But what role modeling did Soundgarden have to know where they would fit in musically? As we established earlier, hair rock and glam rock and showy rock was still all the rage coming out of LA and where all the money was going. Certainly not to bands like Soundgarden. So anyway, I'm going to declare that Soundgarden were not early geniuses. They were not, we could not tell from the very beginning who the artists they would become. And not to say that it wasn't great music of its own ilk, but the Soundgarden that I showed you tonight is not the Soundgarden that we saw just a few years later with Bad Motorfinger and Super Unknown and King Animal later and Down on the Upside, the album after Super Unknown, which is also a fantastic record. Very different band at that point. So anyway, thank you all for joining me tonight. I'm going to come back with another episode of Early Genius, probably later this week, maybe Thursday night. I'm not sure yet. But thank you for tuning in. And if you're tuning in after the fact of this live stream, please comment. I want to know your thoughts on what you liked, what you didn't, how long you tuned in, what held your attention. I'm just growing the show. This is my first real episode of doing this show. And I'm going to do more. I've got a couple dozen on the plate of bands. I'll tell you who the bands I'm going to be profiling. So Smashing Pumpkins, Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, Green Day, Tool, Jane's Addiction, Pantera, Deftones, Nine Inch Nails, Korn, REM, No Doubt, The Replacements, Queensryche, Metallica. Those are just to name some. I've got plenty of others that are going to be coming all live streamed because I want to incorporate your comments in real time. I want to talk with you. That's why this is a live show. So please let me know your thoughts on what you liked and what you didn't like about this show and about the artist. And if you thought I was off base or on target on my assessment, please let me know. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Follow me if you want to on Restream, on Twitch, Facebook, and I'll see you next time. Take care.